Thanks, Mark. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here in Orlando, Florida. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend this session. My name is Dr. Kristina Otero. I am the Vice President of the Aldrin Family Foundation. And today we're going to talk about a really important topic, and that is research in space education. Now, during the presentation today, I'm trying a couple of new things. I really want this to be an interactive conversation between all of us. And so I'm using a new app. It's called Poll Everywhere. You may have used it before. I know Mark has. So it may take a little bit of trial and error getting through some of the first couple of questions, but throughout the presentation, there's lots of interaction. You should be able to answer the questions right from your phone or from the web, whatever is going to be easiest for you. And we're going to get started right away with one of those questions. So this may take a minute trial and error to figure out how to do this, but you should be able to join by web if you go to that link at the very top there. So pollev.com/Kristina. I'll type that in the chat actually. Or maybe Mark, you can be in charge of typing that in the chat. Thanks. So we'll test this out. We'll see if we can get everybody to respond to this. I want to know where everybody is from. It's always helpful to know your audience and get an idea of where everyone is located. So go ahead and take a moment to answer this question. Let's test it.
Sorry, Kristina. I don't think we can see the full URL, so maybe it is best if you put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, you don't see the join at the web at the top of the screen?
Right. We don't see that right now.
Oh, weird. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. 1 second.
Perfect.
I think that's it in the chat. It might show differently on my end because I'm like the host of the poll. So it's good that we're doing this now so we can test it out. Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
And it looked like it worked.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so it looks like we have somebody from, is that Canada? I can't tell. It almost looks like, it is Canada. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up, Nisha. Yeah, awesome. We got India. Okay, we got, looks like Southwest. Okay, California, that must be Mark up there. Arizona, looks like New Mexico-ish area. See if we can get a couple more flags on our map here. Oh, wow, all the way Europe. Okay, cool. Great. And I think somebody may have changed their answer. So it looks like you can go in and like precisely put where you're from. International group for sure. Has that been pretty consistent, Mark, throughout the day?
Yeah, definitely. We were seeing Ireland and Tanzania and Pakistan in the last session. Yeah.
Oh, this is awesome. Yeah, I'm seeing Africa now too, Canada. Cool. I'll give everybody maybe 15 more seconds to kind of sort out how to use the poll everywhere. I have a bunch of these polls throughout our session today. So let's just make sure everyone can get a chance.
I will say, Kristina, I don't know why this is the case, but we're just seeing the original blank map. So we may not be seeing what you're seeing in the presentation.
Okay, let's see. What do you see now?
Still just a map. I wonder if maybe reshare your screen and just share the whole screen.
Yeah, okay. Good idea. What about this?
Oh, yeah, we're seeing just the map. That's weird. I don't know why that's happening.
You don't see any green flags?
No.
Oh, weird. Oh no. I don't know how to troubleshoot this, and I don't want to waste too much of our time. I wonder if there's another way. Let me look. Okay, I'm gonna try something different. A different window. Oh, Mark, funny. Okay, so on the share screen, the app isn't even showing up as an option. Let me do full like desktop share.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because then, that's probably the way to go.
Can you see this here?
Yeah, we see that.
Great. So we'll just have to do that every time. It looks like there's a QR code, which will make it easier. So for all of the sessions, I'll just stop share, reshare, etc. Yeah, and just call me out if you can't see it. But great. Okay, so it looks like we've got all sorts of green flags on the map here. We're from all over the world. Thank you so much for attending the session. Let's go ahead and get started. So let me do a stop share. And let's get back into the slides here. Okay. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a little introduction of what research in space education looks like. We're going to talk about the importance of evidence in research. Practice with purpose. What we mean by that is you all are interested in education, clearly being here at this conference. So how can you practice in your communities, knowing that you have a purpose within space education? We'll talk about student impact, how does research help or assist the real beneficiaries of research, in our case, the students. We'll talk about some current research that we're doing at the foundation, and then we'll end with a conclusion, last couple of questions. So like I said, we have a whole bunch of different polls and surveys throughout. We're going to do a mock self-efficacy survey today. So very interactive. If you have questions, just raise your hand. Mark is very interactive, and I'm sure he'll see you. So thank you, Mark, for being here. Okay, so let's jump in. So what do we already know about research and space education? We're going to jump right into another poll here. Okay, so what do you see right now, Mark?
I see the question, what is your role in education, e.g. teacher, administrator, researcher?
Okay, but you don't see the QR code. Okay, so I'll stop my share and we'll do this.
But I do see in the tab I already opened, I can just respond to that question now. So that's kind of nice.
Okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha. So it looks like it'll automatically refresh. So keep those tabs open. It'll automatically refresh. And what you should be seeing are some of the answers starting to come in. So we looks like we have a teacher, instructor, teacher, instructors. We have a researcher in our attendance today. Someone interested in space, a technologist. Okay, industry professional. Go ahead and take another minute to respond here. And you should see a QR code if you're on your phones. That should make it really easy.
And we have people here who were not here at the beginning of the session, so I'm dropping the link in again.
Okay, thank you. We got a specialist here, maybe somebody who is very involved with outreach. Very important job, that's for sure. All of these are important jobs. But teacher seems to be the biggest one here on our list. And that's great, all of you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here with us. I have some tools for you to share at the very end of our session today that you can take back to your classroom to interact with some of your other teachers and also your students. So we'll get on that. Oh, we have some students even here in our audience. That's great. Well, welcome. You'll definitely be able to take some information from this session today. Okay, so let's go ahead, and now that we know each other a little bit, let's go back to our PowerPoint sharing. Do you see the word cloud here, Mark? Weird, I don't know why. Okay, that's too bad. Oh well, next. So why should you care about research in space education? Now I've made a little list here of, it covers pretty much everybody that we have. You may fall in one or two different categories here, but research affects everybody that's involved in the education community. Teachers are definitely a major beneficiary in addition to students, because research drives the curriculum that you're teaching in your classroom, and also how to teach it. A lot of science and STEM research educators are trying to think of new and innovative ways of best pedagogical or best teaching practices that you can bring in your classroom. So I know we have a lot of teachers here in our audience. Have any of you ever heard of the 5E model of instruction? Maybe you can just raise your hand or type in the chat. Have you ever heard of the 5E model of instruction? That could be a no, which could be the chance because we are international. But the point I was trying to make is that the 5E model of instruction is a very popular way of teaching science and other disciplines here in the US, and that came about because of research. And so that's just one example of how research affects you as a teacher and how you teach in the classroom. For administrators, same sort of thing, but instead it provides a little bit more direction on what kind of programs you can offer in your schools and what kind of funding you can get. Right now in the United States, there's a lot of push for STEM education. And so because of research has shown that there are gaps in STEM. And so that's where schools get a lot of funding. If you're a researcher, this is obvious to you. Research helps inform your future studies. Industry professionals, research is building your future coworkers, your future businesses. Business leaders, this is going to tell us where to invest our money. And then students, of course, I know we have some students here in our audience today. Research creates the space, no pun intended. in which you learn. And so research is so important to the progression of space education. And there's a lot going on right now in space education, but it is really new to education, doing research on space, which may sometimes be called space science research, might be called astronomy research. There's all sorts of different words, but all falls under that same umbrella. So who is conducting all of this research? There's a lot of different entities internationally. It's definitely an international endeavor. It may look different in the United States compared to some of the other countries that we have in attendance here, but a lot of universities are very involved in research. Of course, that's where a lot of the researchers are employed, but federal agencies will do research, including NASA, for example, Department of Education here in the United States, European Space Agency, all do research on the impact of their programs on students and teachers. School districts will do their own internal research to help understand some of the needs of their students and teachers within the district. Industry professionals, nonprofit organizations like where Mark and I are working, the Aldrin Family Foundation. But it really is a global endeavor. You'll see if you have ever read a research article, the authors will cite articles from other researchers from all around the world. And so even though some of the specific problems within a community may be different, all of that literature and all of that prior research comes together to allow progression of the industry. It's very similar to science. Research really is a science. Through consensus and through adding knowledge and adding information, that's how we move forward and progress as researchers. So lots of organizations are involved, probably organizations that you work for or have worked for in the past. Okay, so what are we trying to learn about in space education today? There's a couple of there's 6 big topics that I've pulled from just in my own looking at the literature here. Learning psychology is a big one, and that's a lot of what we do at the Aldrin Family Foundation. We try to understand how do students learn about space the best. And thankfully, space is a really engaging topic for students. Research has shown that students are naturally curious about the universe. And so by kind of harnessing that natural curiosity, we can use learning psychology coupled with space to get them excited about school, which can help their content knowledge gains, but also just enjoyment of school in general, which can help with graduation rates. So learning psychology is a really important topic in education today. Best teaching practices is a big one. So I know we have a lot of teachers here. That's going to drive a lot of how you teach in the classroom and what you're teaching in the classroom. So like that 5E model of instruction example earlier came about because of research. And so in space education specifically, what are some of those best teaching practices that we can be using? We're also looking at workforce preparation. So what kind of skills do students today need to be able to survive and thrive in the future space sector? You know, we're returning to the moon, potentially to Mars. It takes more than an astronaut. It takes more than rocket scientists to be able to do that. So what sort of workforce preparation do we need to be developing and utilizing in our classrooms? That's definitely a big area. Program effectiveness is a big one. That's also kind of what we do at the Aldrin Foundation is we're looking at what sort of innovative strategies or programs can be introduced into schools to help support students' learning and space education. So we'll talk about some of those programs later. Another big one that's fairly recent are opportunity struggles. This is going to be different all around the world. There are student demographic groups that are typically underrepresented in some of the STEM career fields. It's interdisciplinary. And so what are some of those struggles? Where do those struggles come from and how can we support them in the classroom? And then finally, certainly not least though, innovative technologies. What sort of innovations can we use in the classroom, whether that looks like virtual reality, augmented reality, building a satellite? What sort of technologies can we bring that are related to space that students can get their hands on and interact with to get them excited about space? Okay, so our next topic today is talking about evidence. Evidence is everything in research. You can't do research without evidence. This is what you use to answer questions. And it's, like I said earlier, it's very much like science. So space education included, it's transformed by rigorous evidence-based research. And so what do we mean by the word research? Well, I've sort of defined it as a systematic investigation to gather evidence answer a question, and then address a problem. So there's a couple of different parts here, and I really want to focus on that evidence piece because that is so important, especially to add validity and reliability to research. So this might be a flashback to statistics class for some of you, but there's two different types of evidence that are used in space education. Quantitative, which may include like Likert scale surveys. We're going to take one of those today. So hang around at the end. We'll do a sample survey. Quantitative academic tests, you can use fixed values like student grade level or demographics. And then you would use a statistical analysis to work with quantitative evidence or quantitative data. Qualitative, on the other hand, can be really useful in a social science like space education because you can sort of dig deeper into some of the topics or questions that you have with your participants. So this might look like interviews, open-ended responses, maybe conducting observations. The researcher often will make their own interpretations. The challenge with qualitative education, space research education, is the manual analysis part. And so qualitative researchers have to be very careful to make sure that the evidence that they are using is reliable and also valid. And there's lots of ways that you can support that, such as bringing in a third party. There's like using multiple sources of data can help add to the validity of your qualitative analysis. But there's the two main different types that you'll see in space education research, and basically numbers, observations. That can help you remember. Not that there's a test at the end, don't worry. Okay, so let's talk about some of the evidence. Good research in space education is gonna be rigorous, it's gonna be reliable, and it's gonna be valid. And so I have some suggestions here on the screen for those of you that are interested in doing your own research, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But there are some ways that you can add rigor to your own research. You can cite prior research when you're thinking of what questions to ask or to support why you should even ask those questions. Addressing important problems and thinking of your beneficiaries and what the implications of your research might mean is also really important. Using theoretical frameworks as guides, that's a big word there. But for example, like learning psychology theories, for example, self-efficacy, which we're going to talk about later, that is a theoretical framework that you can use sort of as like a skeleton for your research. Using vetted instruments, getting third parties involved, making sure your research is ethical, so ensuring voluntary participation is also important. But then what I think is most important is communicating your results. That's how science progresses. That's how research progresses. So if you do your own research, even if it is sort of informal surveys within your own community, get those published somehow. Communicate that to your community, communicate that to your students, your peers, et cetera, because that's how that's the whole purpose of research, is to share it with others and to progress space education, the whole industry. Okay, so practice with purpose. Who can conduct research? So I've been talking a lot about you being able to do your own research. And that is true. Normally, when we think of research, we think of maybe somebody sitting in a university office. And these are definitely highly trained, highly educated, well-trained individuals, and they're very professional in their research. But anybody can conduct ethical research, even you, every single one of you attending the session today. So I'll give you some tools to be able to do that. And you don't necessarily have to publish in an academic journal, but you can certainly communicate what you find to your communities, and that can help provide you with information to better your practice, but also the peers that you're working with can help improve theirs as well. All right, so we have our next poll. What questions would you ask to inform your practice? We have a diverse group here. Okay, so I gotta switch my screen. One second. Okay, I think I shared the right screen. I'm not sure, Mark. What do you see?
It looks like maybe not. That we're seeing just the
Okay,
slide that says nobody responded, but probably also nobody responded.
that's true. Let me do this. Okay.
That's better. That's the full screen.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So I don't see a QR code on this one, but if you go to that same tab that you were using earlier, you should be able to see the updated question here. So just let me know if you can't, but the question is, what research questions would you ask to inform or improve your professional practice? Now, this is going to look different for everybody because we have a diverse group. First of all, we're from all over the world, but second of all, we're all in different professions. We've got some students here. We've got some teachers, lots of teachers. We've got some researchers. We have some industry professionals. So let's see, we're all wondering different things. What are we wondering about?
No, I did submit something. Are you seeing that yet, Kristina?
No. Okay, let me see. I apologize. I thought the poll everywhere thing would be really cool, but it looks like it's going to be a bit complicated. Okay, so I do see a question on a different screen. Let me try to load that.
I'm realizing when I've seen this done before, it's been, on a projector in a room. So over Zoom,
It's different over Zoom for sure. Yeah.
but
Okay.
yeah,
Can you
maybe,
see?
I mean, you could probably just leave it on sharing your whole screen, even when you're presenting, if that works for you.
Yeah, maybe that will make it better. I might have to like move windows around. So thank you for your patience, everybody, with the poll everywhere thing. So I do see one question here on my screen. Mark, do you see a question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. And I know we have lots of people submitting questions here. I'm not sure why we can't see everybody's, but we do have one on the screen that we can look at. What skill sets and mindsets might be valuable for students to support humanity's future in space? I love that question. That's a great question. So when we talk about skill sets, this might look like kinesthetic skill sets, like working in a laboratory. This might look like teamwork skills, critical thinking skills. It's not always with your hands. So that's a great question for sure. And then mindsets, also a great question. Perseverance is a huge one. Integrity, being able to consider ethical decisions is going to be a big one. And also think about the international endeavor of space. You're going to have to also be considerate of others. And so that's definitely a mindset that we're going to have to be teaching in our classrooms that may or may not be there today. That's a great question. I wish that we could see everybody's. So, oh, we can, I can scroll. What are the limitations of current tools? Also a good question. As we can see even here today, just using the slideshows over Zoom, that can be a limitation. But in classrooms, there's certainly limitations because you have to deal with so much other than just teaching your lesson. You have to, there's the whole student variable to consider, the funding variable to consider, what classroom supplies you have, et cetera. Let's see, what other ones do we have? How can you build a chain community deeper and deeper? Okay, yeah, absolutely. Getting your community involved. How do we make space and space education more accessible to people with sensory limitations? I love that question, and I have a story for you, or actually a research article that I can share with you. I have a colleague, Dr. What was his name? Dr. Jesse Wilcox, and he's at the University of Iowa, and he had an event that he hosted and did research on this event where he brought in children, students that are hard of vision, so they struggle to see or are completely blind, and had different sensory experiences for them to, other than looking at space, they can reach out and touch or they can hear. And so that's just an example of some of the accommodations that we're looking at in space education. So I'll have to share that link to our attendees today so you can look more about that. But his name is Dr. Jesse Wilcox. You can probably search and find it. Okay, other people are wondering about the motivation of students to pursue an education in space. Yeah, great question. Is it because they had a good teacher? Is it because they love science or engineering or something else? Is it because they want to make a difference? That's a really important question, because if we can answer that, then we know what to target in some of the younger grade levels to get more people interested in space. So great question. How can we use those motivations to help them stay on track? So in research, that might look like longitudinal studies or studies that are conducted over periods of time. Great questions. What are the best practices and skills a teacher should have? Great question as well. How can action research be used as a strategy to reflect, design, implement, refine, and gather data related to space education? Action research is a big one, definitely in qualitative research. These are all great questions, everybody. Feel free to continue plugging in those. I'm going to move on to our next slide just for the sake of time. Any chance you can see those questions on my screen right now? You can? Okay, I think we have solved the problem. That's great. Okay, we'll see you at the next one. Okay, so how to get involved. I have a couple of QR codes here. Now, I apologize because most of these are the United States, but they just bring you to a few links at NASA. And then I think the last one might be European Space Agency, but ways to get involved in some of the NASA outreach and other STEM initiatives around the world. Um, I know that some of you are already researchers, so it may be easy to get involved in research. But for those of you that are not and are interested in getting involved in research, you can volunteer to participate in research. That's a big one. Often researchers struggle to find and recruit participants. And so if your school is offering for you to do a study, get involved in that. You make such a huge difference. You may feel that, oh, I'm only one person, my opinion doesn't matter, I won't make a difference, but you really, really do. And it is so valuable to researchers to progressing space education. So please participate when you can. You can ethically conduct your own informal research. You can check within your current organization. It's likely doing their own internal research to better understand and how to support their students or your business partners or whatever industry you're in. You can also reach out to local universities, but those QR codes will take you to some examples that NASA is doing, and then I think it's the European Space Agency as well. And we can share these slides with you afterwards if you are interested to give you some access to these links. Okay, so student impact. Before I go into some of these other slides, do we have any questions so far? Go ahead and post them in the chat and we can address some of those questions before we move on. I see that some of you are sharing. It looks like Mark, thank you. Okay, yes, Dr. Jesse Wilcox, check out some of his work. He's doing some really cool stuff with children that need special accommodations in the classroom. And so he is a great resource for those of you that are interested in that. So thank you so much. It looks like Nusha has published her own research papers. That's awesome. Yeah, definitely check out Nusha's work. We got to see what she's up to and connect with her on LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing. Let's see, are they workable globally? I'm not sure what that question addresses, but definitely ask that again if you want us to address that. And then, yes, we will share these slides afterwards.
And Christina, I should mention with the questions about the visually impaired, this topic came up in the previous session, and a quick Google search, I came across an acronym I hadn't seen before. With AVIB was astronomy for the visually impaired and blind, and there's a lot of sort of tactile and auditory ways to make it accessible.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. So check out those resources. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there. I've never heard of that AVIB, but yeah, I'll have to check that out. Thank you, Mark. All those resources are so important. And that's a whole student demographic that previously is underrepresented in STEM. And so our job as researchers and educators is to find ways to connect with them and get them involved in space. And it goes beyond just what you can see or what you can hear or whatever the sense is that maybe they need assistance with. So certainly share those resources with each other, because that's how we reach that untapped talent, is how I would say it. We need them involved in the field. Okay, so let's talk about the real beneficiaries of all of this. What is the whole purpose of doing space research? Well, it's to reach the students, because they are our future space explorers. They're our future business leaders, our future tech partners. Okay, we've got another poll. Can you see the QR code, Mark? Yay! Okay, I think we have figured it out. So the trick seems like to share the whole desktop. Okay, so go ahead and one word or a short phrase. What challenges do you think students face in space education? Oh, math. Yes, that is definitely a huge challenge for students. Not having enough resources. Yeah, that's a big one for sure. I see the words are being separated. We'll try to figure out what they mean. But yeah, not having enough resources is a big one. And that might even include kinesthetic resources. That might include teacher support. That might even include lack of support from their parents at home. And so, yeah, that's definitely big challenges. Accessibility, yep, for sure. There's a lot of big projects, at least here in the United States, that are funded by the National Science Foundation to try to reach some students and fund some programs where they may not otherwise have access to some innovative activities or programs. Financial challenges, definitely, especially going to college. A lot of the space careers today require very advanced degrees. And so a lot of children today, their families can't afford going to college. And so what a lot of schools are doing here in the US is how can we train our students to be ready for our workforce, but in a career that does not require a college degree. So what kind of tech skills can they have, or kinesthetic skills? Those are just some examples. So definitely trying to address that financial challenge. I think that's imposter syndrome that I'm reading there. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge. Space is amazing. And so somebody getting hired in space can be really scary, and they can go through some psychological challenges. And so absolutely. But the biggest one I'm seeing here is accessibility. Wow, a few role models. I love that one. So we're going to talk in a little bit, and I may need to hurry up because I love talking about all this. I get excited, but vicarious experiences within self-efficacy, that's a source of self-efficacy. That's one of the things that we're looking at the Aldrin Family Foundation, is making sure students are able to see and have role models in space. So that's a big one. All right, but accessibility is the biggest thing that I see here. So yeah, that's a huge one for sure. Thank you everyone for sharing. Okay, so space for education. Research does impact local laws. It impacts school graduation requirements. It impacts funding opportunities, teacher expectations. Our students, though, are real beneficiaries of the research that's conducted in space education. It provides them with the content knowledge that they need just to understand the universe that we live in. But it also provides them with the professional practices that they need for a STEM literate society. You know, we want our voters, if you live in a democratic society, to understand how science works or any of the STEM disciplines. And for those of you that are outside the US or don't live in a democratic society, you want them to be able to think critically, our children to think critically, and to work in a community that is that is advancing in the 21st century. Students also benefit because of career preparation. We want to make sure our students are prepared to work in the space sector and have the skills, both kinesthetic knowledge and mindset, to work in the space sector. We can use space to spark their interest just to go to school at all and make sure that they can graduate and get an education. So there's lots of ways that students benefit. Everyone benefits, but students are our ultimate beneficiary. Okay, so another poll here. If you were doing your own research, we talked about some of the problems that the children are facing in your community. How would you address some of those problems? So maybe you have accessibility issues, or maybe the children have financial issues. If you could be in charge, how would you address some of those things? Okay, so I hope we can see some of these answers coming in. Do we see that, Mark? Just give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, we figured it out. So listening, yeah. And maybe we can elaborate on that in the chat. What do we mean by listening? Are we listening to students' problems that they're facing? Are we listening to our teachers' concerns? Are we listening to our policymakers? What do we mean by listen? Let's talk about that too. And then the rest of you, go ahead and continue adding your responses as well. Okay, adding more informal education. Absolutely. Yeah. This might look like summer camps. This might look like visits to museums. This might even look like parent involvement. How can we get our parents learning more about space so they can share that information with our students? Space clubs, providing a formal organized place for students to be able to access all the resources. Yep, absolutely. Something student friendly. A lot of resources are teacher friendly, but students, that just glazes right over that. We need student friendly resources. Connecting with industry professionals. Yeah, absolutely. This might look like bringing in guest speakers to your classroom. This might look like even Zoom calls to your classroom. Maybe industry professionals can act as judges for some of the projects that teachers and students are doing in the classrooms. Space camps. Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like what all of you are thinking to get students involved in your community is just getting the students exposed, getting them out there, getting them doing things related to space. And yeah, I totally agree. These are great ways to get involved with your students. But I do want to circle back to that one, the very beginning, someone posted, listen. And I think that's a really important topic. So what do we mean by that when we want to listen? Are we listening to the students' concerns? some of their struggles? Are we listening to the teachers' concerns? Are we listening to schools? What do we mean? Communities? And feel free to unmute yourself if you would like. Don't be shy.
Yeah, I wanted to write it down, but it was so long. So
Okay.
yeah, listening in terms of listening to students, what do they want? What are their aspirations? And also at the same time, listen, like I wrote it in the chat in the beginning of this conference that we should look into the supply and demand. So we have to take a look at like both of these sides and try to listen to both of these sides, the supply and the demand, and try to provide as much as we can to both of these people. I don't want to go on longer. So both teachers and the students.
Both teachers and students. Yeah, that's so important. Thank you so much, Nusha, for sharing. Am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Nusha?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I definitely agree. Listening to both sides, teachers and students, and really not listening to direct, but listening to understand is really important, to understand what some of their needs are. So that would fall for sure under qualitative research, and you can do in your own classroom. If you're a teacher, interview your students. It can be as a full class, it can be individually. Get to know what some of their struggles are. Get to know how you can support them. And listen to understand. Likewise, if you're an administrator or if you're a researcher or working with teachers in some capacity, listen to what their needs are. What do they struggle with? Do they need resources? Do they need lesson plan support? Do they need to be connected with industry professionals to learn the content? Try to understand what their needs are, how you can best support them. And then that's going to help address some of the problems that are unique to your community. Okay, thank you all for participating in that and for sharing, Nusha. So let's talk about some of the current research that's being done in space education. There is a lot. We talked earlier a little bit about Dr. Wilcox, Dr. Jesse Wilcox, and the work that he's doing up in Iowa in the United States. But there's a lot of research that's happening, and that includes at the Aldrin Family Foundation. So we've got another poll for you. How do you stay current on active research being conducted in your professional community? So I've got a couple of options here. Academic journals? Do you get like newsletters to your email? Do you partner with a university or other research organizations or something else even? How do you stay connected to the research that's going on in space education today? Oh, I see lots of people are doing some self-initiated searches. That's great. That definitely takes up a lot of free time to be able to understand what research is happening, but that's great. And I even see that our #1 right now is academic journals. I'm surprised. That's great. Kind of a tie between self-initiated searches and academic journals going back and forth. That's wonderful, everyone. Academic journals, a lot of resources are available for free online through Google Scholar. A lot of times a PDF will be linked and you can access some of those really rigorous research articles directly there. You don't necessarily need a university login. So use Google Scholar as your resource. Not a promotion for Google Mark, but it is very helpful. I use it all the time to help me find my own research. Some folks that are partnering with their universities and communities. Very few newsletters. I'm curious about the other. So for those of you that typed other in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing with others involved in our presentation today to see if we can share some of those resources, that would be helpful too. But great that a lot of you are getting involved in those academic journals. That's really where the most rigorous research is being conducted and published. And that's a great way to stay involved and on top of what's going on in space education. For those of you that are not researchers, just to share, the publishing process takes a really long time. Nusha, you probably know this because you've published before. So for example, I'm working on publishing something that for work that I did in literally 2020. It's 4 years later and it's only just now getting published. And so it's a long process. It goes through lots of validation through different reviewers. And so that's just something to keep in mind. You know, time, it's always progressing, and what you see being published this year, 2024, is probably work that was done 4 years ago. So you can just imagine, you know, how work progresses and the kind of studies that you're looking at. Okay, so thank you for responding to that one there. So let's talk about some of the research that we're doing at the Aldrin Family Foundation. We talked earlier about the sort of like the psychology of learning and what students are experiencing in the classroom. And that is a big one of what we're looking at with the foundation. We are really interested in student self-efficacy. And so I know it's a big word, but basically what that means is their confidence learning science or any of the STEM disciplines. We really want to understand how can we provide them the support they need to feel like they can learn science? And that can be a big barrier for a lot of students. And interestingly, when the teacher has high confidence or high self-efficacy, that tends to sort of like rub off on the students. And so it's also important to consider the teacher variable and understand what their self-efficacy looks like as well. And so I have these 4 square bullet points that I've got listed here: mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, social persuasion, physiological and affective states. These are what are called the sources of self-efficacy. And in other words, this is how you build student self-efficacy. Mastery experiences, we at the foundation want to provide students with practice interacting with science content, space materials, experiences, etc. Vicarious experiences, we talked about this earlier. Somebody had mentioned in our word cloud role models. That's a source of self-efficacy, vicarious experiences. So how can you bring in guest speakers to your classroom? How can you get your students exposed to people who look like them, who talk like them, who share the same culture as them? Whatever is the demographic of your students, and there may be many, get people from the space sector into your classroom, whether virtually or physically, get them in front of your students. And that is going to be a huge source of self-efficacy, especially for women, interestingly. That's what research is showing. Social persuasion is a big one. So that's kind of like maybe the teacher says, hey, you can do this. You know, that verbal support is huge. You can ask student peers, you can sort of structure it like a Kagan style structure. Hey, that was a really good idea that you shared with your class. Great job. Or, hey, I really like how you developed this model of the solar system. Like that's an example of social persuasion. Social persuasion. So getting your students talking to each other or your industry professionals talking to each other in such a way that is encouraging, that can really build a lot of confidence. And then physiological and affective states. Okay, so what this looks like at the Aldrin Family Foundation, we have giant moon and Mars maps. Mark, if you're listening, if you wouldn't mind posting in the chat a link to what those look like. These maps are huge. They're 30 feet by 15 feet. And when they're super colorful, and when students walk in and see the giant moon and Mars maps, they're amazed. And it captures that physiological state, that emotion that they might experience. So that can be a way to get students interested and involved and get them feeling more confident, is just having positive feelings, positive experiences, working with space-related things. So that's what we're doing at the foundation with our work with self-efficacy. We're also looking at student STEM career interests. That's a big deal. How can we get students that are maybe typically underrepresented in STEM, how can we get them excited about working in a STEM career field in space? And so looking at some of those career competencies, developing some of the kinesthetic skills, looking at what sort of industry professionals are looking for in a new hire, and then targeting those in our programs is just something that we're doing at the foundation. So I'm going to share some of the programs here on the next slide. I feel like I talked about all this, so I'm going to skip this slide. Oh no, where's the slide I'm looking for? Okay, hang on. Okay, this is the slide I'm looking for. So the programs that we're doing at the Aldrin Family Foundation, we have the giant moon and Mars maps. Got a little image there. We do some summer camps where we embed some of those career development skills that they need to be learning. And so that's a great place to get students excited. There's that physiological and affective state, bottle rockets, what's more fun than that? But developing some of those teamwork skills, thinking critically, how to persevere, how to collect data, etc. So that's one of the ways that we do that through our summer camps. And then S cubed is pretty new to us. Student satellites in space. So S to the third, S cubed. And this is a great program that we're working on right now to get students learning about how to build a satellite to potentially launch into space. And so they're learning kinesthetic hand tool skills. They're learning the engineering design process, how to work with others. They're learning the science and engineering content. So these are just some examples that we're doing at the foundation. And maybe you're doing something similar in your organizations that can be modeled and vice versa. Okay, so I want to backtrack a little bit. Okay, to this slide here. We're going to take a sample survey. So go ahead and scan this QR code. This is not a poll everywhere thing, so you'll have to go to the link. But this is a professional survey that has been adapted by the STEBI-A. So this came out back in the 90s. So it's an older survey, but is highly vetted. And what I mean by that is a lot of other researchers have come in and sort of validated it and provided their feedback and their consensus on it. And what I've done for our example here is just change the word science into space science. So this isn't anything like formal that would be published because it would have to go through, again, that validation process. But go ahead and let's do, I think 3 minutes will be enough time, maybe 4. So how about it is 2:16 Eastern time here in Orlando. So on the 20, wherever you live, on the 20, we'll come back and regroup. All right, go ahead and take about 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to stop my screen share and we're going to look at some of these responses. This is completely anonymous, by the way, so no one can track, what your responses were. Okay, it's just about the 20 here on my time. And let's go ahead and look at our responses. For some reason it says 0 responses, but I see them here, so I don't know about that. But this is going to be really interesting to look at. It looks like we've got 5 people that took the survey. And so as researchers, when we go through the data, we look to try to find patterns. And so, for example, one of the first patterns that I see here is within our group, a lot of you feel like you find better ways to teach space science. And I'm not surprised, we're a group of passionate and dedicated educators. So that's no surprise here. But if you're in a regular classroom, these numbers might look completely different. So really knowing your audience is going to be important. Let's look at our next question here. Even when I try very hard, I don't teach space science as well as I do most subjects. So you can see a little shift here. There's also a shift in the wording. This is a negatively worded question, which can throw off a lot of people. I'm personally not a fan of those. I'd rather word everything positively, but in research, there are ways to sort of capture the validity of participants' responses, and this is one way to do it. So as you can see, we see a shift downwards, and that is expected given our audience here. All right, let's look at this next one. I know the steps necessary to teach space science concepts effectively. So this is pretty interesting. We're kind of in the middle here. And what that tells me just on first glance is maybe some folks in our audience don't have all the tools that they need to teach some of these advanced concepts that students are learning in the classroom. So a very interesting result there. Let's look at this next one. Okay, another negatively worded one. I'm not very effective at monitoring space science experiments. So as we can see, it's sort of that shift downward, which is what was expected. I generally teach space science ineffectively. Yeah, that negatively worded word choice, the ineffectively, kind of throws us off a little bit. But again, we can see that downward trend. Couple more here. Everyone scored pretty high on this one. I understand space science concepts well enough to be effective in teaching elementary level space science. Yeah, everybody scored pretty high here. That's expected. We're all excited about space. We're here at a space conference in the middle of the day, at least here in the US. So that's expected, and great for all of you that you have that content knowledge. That's really important. A couple more here. I find it difficult to explain to students. There's that negative word, difficult. So we see that shift downward. I am typically able to answer student space science questions. Okay, the opposite, positively worded. So we see that trend upward. That's great. Ooh, look at this one. This is an interesting result. I wonder if I have the necessary skills to teach space science. Okay, so this question here really digs into that self-efficacy of teachers, making sure that they feel like they are confident to teach space science, they have the skills that they need. And if you are an administrator or you work with supporting teachers, utilizing those 4 sources of self-efficacy are ways that you can build your teachers' confidence teaching. And then if they did feel confident, then we would see a trend. We would see, let's see, this is negatively worded. So we would see the trend downwards. Hopefully they would definitely feel they have the skills to teach space science. So definitely interesting to see the gap there. Given a choice, I would not invite the principal to evaluate my space science teaching. So most folks recognize the negative wording here. I'm wondering if maybe that 5th one, maybe you misread, I'm not sure, but we definitely want our teachers to have confidence. And so what are some tools that they need to feel that if the principal did come into their space science classroom, that they feel good about it and confident about it. So we definitely need to support our teachers. And then it looks like we've got 2 more. We have another negatively worded one. There's that trend downwards. And then the last one, when teaching space science, I welcome student questions. Most folks answer very highly here. That's expected given our audience. So wonderful job, everybody. Just a little sample of what some of the data may look like when we are working in research. And this is something that you can make a copy of and take back to your classroom and do with your teachers. And then I also have a student one that you can share with your students as well to understand their self-efficacy. So let me switch my screen share. And in the meantime, if you have any questions about that, type them in the chat. Oh, okay. Okay, I think we're looking back at my slides. Can someone give me like a head shake yes? Or a thumbs up? Okay, yes, thank you. All right, so we looked at our observations of the survey results. Did anybody want to share anything in the chat regarding the survey results? I know we have just a few more minutes. We have 5 minutes. So what are your thoughts? Anything you want to share? No sharing. That's okay. Let's move on then. Okay, so I do want to take a moment to invite all of you. Mark, I hope this is okay, but I wanted to invite all of you to the Space Curriculum Collaborative. The Aldrin Family Foundation is hosting this July 22nd to 25th. If you do RSVP to this, please make sure that it's a serious RSVP because we have very limited space. We are expecting 40 guests, and it is a 4-day conference or like a collaborative workshop where teachers and administrators and industry professionals are going to get together and share ideas and talk about some of the active and current things that are going on in our classrooms and develop some rich curriculum to bring back into classrooms. So if you are interested, we're sending out formal invitations to the public tomorrow. So you guys are kind of like a little special group. Scan that QR code, and if you can definitely attend, feel free to go ahead and do so there. And we're providing lunch for all of you. And it's just going to be a really wonderful time. We have some really nice guest speakers that are coming. Mark's going to be there. I'm going to be there. And we'll be there to support you. So I wanted to extend that invitation to all of you. It's going to be at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex in Cape Canaveral, Florida. So you'll be able to see our amazing we have the Atlantis space shuttle. We have some really cool rockets in the Gateway Center that you'll be able to see. And then we'll be working in the Center for Space Education on sites there to listen to some amazing guest speakers and work together and just be together and be a community and develop some good curriculum to bring back to our classroom. So you are all welcome to attend. It is international as well. This is going to be posted on our website starting tomorrow. So if you happen to miss the QR code today and you are interested, keep an eye out on the website or just shoot me an email or Mark an email. Okay, so in conclusion, just on time, I really appreciate all of you attending today. I really appreciate all of you participating in our polls and asking questions and sharing ideas and just collaborating together. I'm so glad that you are all here today. If you want to connect, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. You can also send me an email. My email and LinkedIn are both posted on the screen right now. And I just want to extend the last 2 minutes that we have together to answer any questions that you may have or give you an opportunity to share with the community as well.
So questions for Kristina or anything you'd like to share with the group? Oh, Nusha, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to, first of all, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of us did. I wanted to ask about this event that you just shared the link to. Is it only open to the US citizens? I'm a Canadian and I just wanted to know if I can also join.
Absolutely. We have folks coming from Hungary. We have folks coming from the UK. They're coming in from everywhere. So we would love to have you. Please come if you're able.
I will be there. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Can't wait to meet you.
Same.
We
Okay,
do.
so I see. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just going to bring it to your attention, but you got it.
Okay, yeah. So I see in the chat we have somebody who's very young, 18 years old, and asking for some tips for the future. So I'll give mine first, and then the rest of our attendees maybe can jump in and share some tips as well. But my number one tip for you is to stay curious. I think that curiosity is such an important skill and mindset to bring into the space sector. What that might look like is asking lots of questions. First of all, ask everybody questions. Whatever you're curious about, don't be afraid to ask it because somebody's going to want to talk to you and they're going to want to answer that for you. So ask questions, get involved is a big one. I think the fact that you are here today is a great way that you can get involved in the space community. So kudos to you for doing that on your own without needing us to tell you. Getting involved in any way that you can is a great way that's going to help your future. You can network with folks. You can get to know, some of the events that are going on all around the world. Let me see. One more is perseverance. That's a big one. The space sector is it can be very competitive and everybody wants to get involved. And so persevere, apply everywhere, whatever job industry you're going for, apply everywhere, get to know people, ask those questions. Those are great ways that can help your future. And I'll open that up to the rest of the group here if they have other tips as well.
I know one tip that I did myself. So there are lots of volunteering opportunities and a lot of nonprofit organizations like SETS, Space Generation Advisory Council. And even if you don't have the necessary background, but you're just interested, that is enough. You can still get involved. I got involved by just taking pictures at the events. And then that made me really interested. And then I started, studying engineering, got my master's, and I'm now leading one of their projects. So you can get started from any position, but just as Kristina said, just get involved and don't lose your passion.